Protesters and protests were held marking the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis 1 year ago. And now 1 year on, the use of that tragic event has done more to cause pain and destruction than it has brought healing and reconciliation. Why is that? We're going to discuss that amongst other things with author and radio host Sam Sorbo in a few minutes. States such as Florida and Texas are fighting back and gaining political clout when it comes to big tech and big government. We're going to talk to attorney and Victory News contributor John Graves a little later in the newscast. Right now, let's go to Mike Garofalo with today's top story.
All right, on to our other news. 1 year after his death at the hands of Minneapolis police, a rally was held in New York City on Tuesday to remember George Floyd. Several hundred protesters chanted and held placards denouncing police brutality as they listened to speeches demanding police reforms and accountability across the country. On May 25th, 2020, in Minneapolis, former police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes as he cried for help and eventually grew still. Chauvin, who is white, was convicted last month of murder and faces a sentencing on June 25th. 3 other former officers await trial on aiding and abetting charges. Floyd was also honored Tuesday with a moment of silence in New York and in the city where he died, Minneapolis. Fallout from last year, George Floyd's death, sparked the defunding the police movement, which gained traction in a number of cities, as we know. However, after a skyrocketing crime rate in a number of those metro areas, local leaders are rethinking that thought process. As of late, we are hearing more about not defunding the police, but rather refunding the police. For instance, in Minneapolis last year, some city council members wanted to get rid of the city's police department altogether. However, just in the last few months, the city council there reversed course and voted to increase funding for the police department by $6.4 million. In Los Angeles, where last year the mayor and some city council members talked about cutting funding, last week that tune changed, with LAPD now looking to hire an additional 250 officers. And finally, in Baltimore, last year city leaders cut $22 million from the police budget. Earlier this month, they reversed that cut and added an additional $6 million to the police budget. The bottom line, what a difference a year makes. And along with the refund the police movement, support for Black Lives Matter, the organization behind many of the George Floyd-related protests and riots, also appears to be on the decline. A morning consult poll shows that less than half of voters who were surveyed hold a favorable view of the BLM movement. And it found overall support down 13% to 48%. Support among Republicans dropped 16% down to just 36% supporting the BLM movement. And among independent support has reportedly dropped from 58% in June of 2020 to 44% just this month. And as history marks the 100th anniversary of the TULSA race massacre next week, we're learning Joe Biden will be heading to Oklahoma to commemorate the incident there. And the president won't be the only well-known Democrat on hand. Organizers of the annual gathering have announced that former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams will be the keynote speaker during the event, which is held to never forget the 1921 attack when a white mob reportedly killed hundreds of black residents and destroyed more than 1,000 homes, businesses, and churches, as well as schools. That massacre is said to have begun after a 19-year-old black shoe shiner was accused of assaulting a 17-year-old white female elevator operator in Tulsa's Drexel building. The televised event will also feature singer John Legend. Greg, back to you.
All right, thank you, Mike. I want to welcome Sam Sorbo. She's a radio host, filmmaker, actress, author, and educational activist. Sam, welcome to Victory News, first of all.
Thank you.
Where do we start? The Uniter-in-Chief is what he touted himself as, and he's going to mark the 100th anniversary of a riot that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Will he also go to commemorate the Emancipation Proclamation, Gettysburg? I mean, it seems to be one-sided with this president. Your thoughts?
Well, there's a theme to everything that the Democrats do, and the theme is divide and conquer, and that's what they intend to do with the United States of America. And so what you'll see is they focus on the evils that do exist, right? But they won't laud the or commemorate the good things that have happened. And so we can start with the George Floyd thing. For some reason, we are vaunting as a hero, a man who was a criminal. Yes. What happened to him should not have happened. And the police have done the necessary diligence to correct the harms that were done, and this young man lost his life. However, he was involved in crime. He attacked a police officer. That's something that you shouldn't do. Full stop. So, and yet on the left, we see that they will applaud the criminals and disdain for the heroes. And that's a very sad thing. And so the Tulsa march is a similar thing. I can't believe that the president is coming out of his bunker to attend that, but then refuses to attend things that he actually should be attending. And I wonder if he's going to continue to wear a mask. I think that the whole thing is so ludicrous that they're going to commemorate. Yes, it's a horrific thing that happened, but where is the celebration of the greatness of this country? And I'm actually have a positive outlook on this, because I think that people are waking up and they're seeing that, you can't just continually browbeat people into thinking that they're criminals, they're horrible people, because Americans are not horrible people by and large. We are the greatest nation in the United States. The United States of America is the greatest nation in the world. And we've offered the greatest leap in prosperity that the world has ever seen and likely will ever see. And so I'm hoping that people are really starting to wake up. I'm getting emails from people who are saying, I used to be a Democrat, but boy, they lost me at Hillary, or they lost me at Biden. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping to see that trend continue.
Going forward, New York, Chicago, violence, Minneapolis, Portland, violence, and yet we want to defund the police. Yesterday, we reported Black Lives Matter activist was arrested finally for his part in the January 6th Capitol riot, and no one wants to talk about those things. The president has yet to go to the border where violence is occurring. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, this, of course, this goes completely with my book. Because frankly, they take, for instance, the reason that I wrote my book was because fascism is actually a left-wing, a left-wing ideal. It's not right-wing, but the narrative of the left, the narrative of the political Democrats, is that there's violence on both sides. There's not violence on both sides. And now we see they finally arrested one of the instigators at the January 6th, who was in fact not a Trump supporter. But they're trying to say that both sides are bad and their side somehow is better. That's not true. Their side is so much worse that they have to do things to try to denigrate the right. And when they do that, they show their cards, they show that they are lying, and hopefully we'll see people waking up.
Mm-hmm. I so appreciate you bringing that up. It's so true, and people don't know that history, that the Democratic Socialist Party of Germany were the fascists. That is Hitler's party. And your book covers that very well. Words for Warriors. I encourage you to get it. I encourage you to get 2 of them and give one to someone. Thank you so much. We'll be back with you in just a moment after a few more stories, if that's okay. How about Texas? Explosive growth in Texas over the past decade is paying off with a major boost in political clout. It comes in the form of 2 additional congressional seats and electoral votes, deepening its already massive influence in the nation's politics. The new U.S. Census Bureau figures released Monday confirm the relentless population boom in America's biggest red state since 2010. Texas has gained nearly 4 million residents, more than any other state in sheer numbers. I want to bring in Victory News contributor John Graves. John, most of those seem to be coming from California, and I see signs all over Texas saying, please don't California my Texas. Your thoughts?
I think it's a mixture of people coming from the Northeast and California, but what's happening is some of those people are escaping the radical leftists like Sam Sorbo just talked about in her book, where they're trying to get out of there and come somewhere where it's free. The sad part is the majority of them that are moving in are coming because their company is escaping the leftist policies, but they're bringing the leftist policies with them. And so there's a real battle and a real shift in this whole nation that's moving things around. And you see states like Texas and Florida that are leading, growing. And so hopefully that will continue.
People are voting with their feet, pretty much is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, they absolutely are. The challenge is we have a lot of work to do as believers to do cultural apologetics, because if someone's fleeing another state because the companies are collapsing and the radical leftist policies are collapsing, and then they come to the state and want those same kind of policies, that's the problem, is now you've seen Texas over the last 10 years move, and about a third of the state didn't live here 10, 15 years ago. And so it's a big, big change, and the need is for cultural apologetics, political discipleship, and say, look, we welcome you here, but we don't want you to take any of our freedoms away because you're escaping other places. And the fascinating thing is, if you look at a lot of the people who are escaping communist countries, socialist countries, they're the ones that are most passionate about freedom, about freedom of speech, about religious freedom and those kind of things. And so hopefully some of these people will wake up to, why am I having to relocate? It's because of those policies.
So you make up an interesting point there. We were talking about racism and the things that were in the first block there. Systemic racist is what we hear all the time from this administration.
Yep.
Yet I see people still breaking into this country to get here. It doesn't make sense. Let's go to a country where I'm going to be discriminated against. That doesn't seem to be the case.
I'm glad you asked that question. Think of two things. People are risking their lives to get out of socialist countries, and the left is wanting them all to come in while trying to change this country to a socialist country, a Democrat socialist like Nazi you just mentioned. Go back to the story. Why is Joe Biden celebrating a white racist riot 100 years old? Because he can keep the narrative of the victim mindset that you got to have the government. You can't stand on your own 2 feet, no matter all the things that have happened, and ignore Black Lives Matter Marxist riots that are destroying different businesses. They don't want to talk about that. They want to sweep that under the rug or say, well, it's really justified. You can do that stuff all day long. It's justified. And there's the hypocrisy. We're supposed to discern the differences in these things as a believer and then know what to do.
Yeah. John Graves, thank you so much. Mike, back to you.
Greg, Kentucky's Rand Paul was the first U.S. senator to contract the coronavirus back in March of last year. He's also made it abundantly clear he will not be getting vaccinated against COVID-19 since he believes he already has a natural immunity. Senator Paul has also had some highly visible and somewhat testy that is, exchanges with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
We don't know whether the pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan or evolved naturally, but we should want to know. 3 million people have died from this pandemic, and that should cause us to explore all possibilities. Instead, government authorities, self-interested in continuing gain-of-function research, say there's nothing to see here. Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans.
And even after a pardon from then President Donald Trump, prosecutors still have their sights set on Steve Bannon. According to the Washington Times, the former Trump administration chief strategist had charges dismissed against him on Tuesday, despite the objections of a prosecutor. A U.S. district judge called the dismissal the proper course of action. And she did make it clear that the pardon does not necessarily mean Bannon was innocent of the alleged crime. Steve Bannon had pleaded not guilty to charges alleging he and others defrauded donors in a $25 million fund to build a wall along the nation's southern border. And an antitrust lawsuit has been filed in the District of Columbia. The target is not big tech, although it is a retail giant. According to UPI, the Attorney General of Washington, D.C. said on Tuesday he filed an antitrust lawsuit against Amazon. AG Carl Racine is charging that the company has eliminated competition and unfairly raised prices. Racine says the retail giant does so by fixing prices with those businesses who sell products on its website. It appears at issue will be what was called the price parity provision, or at least the latest version of that, which prohibits businesses from selling their products on a non-Amazon website at a lower price. Greg, back to you.
All right. It seems that the New Mexico governor, Michelle Lujan, is challenging Gretchen Whitmer and Andrew Cuomo as the most corrupt Democrat governor award. A nonprofit government watchdog Searchlight broke news last week that Lujan's office used an encrypted messaging app to communicate among staff. In the report, Searchlight says that the governor regularly instructs staff to delete their messages. This news broke after 2 senior employees were fired over their objection to using the apps. All right, Sam Sorbo, let me bring you back in here. As I was listening to Mike a while ago, my head was about to explode with this governor, but a climate change, how much are you willing to pay? Are we about to have the climate change telethon every year?
Oh my goodness. And hopefully it'll be government run, so we know that the funds will be well used. I don't understand. I gotta say, I really hope that people start waking up and understand that the more power you give the government, the more corrupt it becomes. It's that simple. It's literally, it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. Power equals corruption, period. The climate change thing is, look, it used to be global cooling, and I don't know if you remember this, but the oceans were going to freeze by the year 2000.
Yes.
And then it became global warming because, they got it wrong, and now it's warming. And now it's climate change because they literally don't know what it is.
Which way it's going to go. If we could just find the people who fix global cooling to fix global warming, we would have it made. Or I was suggesting we turn our air conditioners, instead of the outside of the house, the outside window ones, we turn them outside. We could cool everything off. We could just, everybody.
Greg, who says that this is the perfect temperature right now, that we have to keep it the way that it is? Who said that? Maybe it would be better if it were a little bit warmer. Maybe it would be better if it were a little bit cooler. There are people who still starve. A little bit warmer, a little more CO2 might be helpful for the plants to grow so that people would get food. But nobody considers that. There are just some experts that say, it's perfect right now. Let's stick a fork in it and call it done. But I got to go back to Rand Paul.
Yeah, go.
He's standing strong.
He is.
Because frankly, this gain of function research, and now they just passed the bill in the Senate, and I think Fauci's going to go down.
Yeah, as I look at this, I've got a timeline. I've got a whole stack of notes here, and we've been researching and working on it. But the one that stands out to me, in January 11th of 2017, Georgetown University, Fauci is speaking. Lord Fauci said, no doubt Trump will face surprise infectious disease outbreak in his term. That was 9 days before the president was inaugurated. How did he know? So as you begin to look at this, it doesn't add up.
Well, their hubris knows no bounds. So they brag about the crime even before they commit it.
Absolutely true. Well put. Mike, back to you.
Greg, after months of what appears to be an increasingly tense relationship, the White House announced today that Joe Biden will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin next month in Switzerland. According to Press Secretary Jen Psaki, the meeting in Geneva on June 16th will hold discussions on a full range of pressing issues as they seek to restore predictability and stability to the U.S.-Russia relationship. Now, according to Reuters, the Kremlin said the leaders would discuss bilateral ties, problems related to strategic nuclear stability, and other issues, including cooperation in the fight against COVID-19, as well as regional conflicts. Greg, back to you.
Absolutely. Our prayers are for those people as well. I'm bringing Sam Sorbo in real quickly here. Sam, it's okay for this president to meet with Putin. It was bad when Trump did. This president.
You noticed.
I have noticed. I've been paying attention. Why is there the double standard?
They're nothing without their double standard. Haven't you figured that out? That is what defines them, is everything that they do is good and everything that people who oppose them do is bad. And that's the only way that they can have it, because they lie all the time. I love that Blinken said that none of the funds would go to Hamas. How can he possibly promise that? But he promised, but he can't possibly promise that. He's relying on the fact that hopefully nobody will find out. And Biden sitting down with Putin, I mean, Putin is the evil mastermind, and he's very dangerous, and President Trump never should have talked to him. And now they're going to have Biden talk to him. I mean, Democrats, hello, wake up. This is your president. He's our president. But come on, folks, we need to, this is what the Democrat Party put forward as the best and brightest and greatest. And by the way, he got more votes than the nation's first black president.
Yeah, there you go. All right, real quick, tell us about the book, 30 seconds.
So my book is called Words for Warriors. It's humorous. It's a lot of satire and a lot of sarcasm, and I think that's why people really enjoy it. But there's a lot of truth in there. It's dedicated to the Word, because the Word is the way that we communicate truth. Right. And we have to stop the left from taking our words and turning them against us.
That's absolutely true. Sam Sorbo, Words for Warriors. I encourage you to get it. Thanks for being with us today. John Graves, help us. John?
Can I tie off of her book?
Yes,
Words
please.
for Warriors. Think about this. We've talked about this before. In Genesis, what did Satan use? Words. Did God really say blank to try to deceive? What did he do with Jesus in the New Testament? Throw yourself off of here. Here's what the scripture says. And Jesus had to know the word to fight when people want to distort and deceive and use deception to get us all. Think about every one of these stories. Rand Paul, they want to silence him. Steve Bannon, they want to silence him. Big Tech, they want to silence your voice. So what her book is doing to me are the two great needs. People who want to do something need to be discipled. People who don't understand or maybe are confused or deceived need apologetics of the cultural issues of our day. And it requires us to understand the word and not compromise the truth, but do it with grace, do it with winsomeness. And to me, there couldn't be enough of this right now. That's one of the biggest problems. If people can see through the deception, that's how we're going to know how to get through this.
So true. John, real quickly, this whole thing about words, this whole thing about, tell us about your website, how people can connect with you and get a voice.
Yeah, millionvoices.org. We're actually launching a new tool that's already on there. If you go there, you can put your address in and we'll tell you who your state senator is, your state rep is. We give cultural apologetics. We do these kind of stories. We do podcast articles on the culture issues of our day from a biblical standpoint, like Jesus, full of truth, but full of grace. We don't need to be soft about it, and we don't need to be beating people up with the truth either.
Absolutely
and so
true.
That's our passion, is to be a megaphone for the people of God out there.
Absolutely true. I want to thank Sam Sorbo, John Graves for being with us today.